We are awaiting President Trump's departure for his high-stakes summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska.
Senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy is in Anchorage already, where it is 3 a.m. Peter.
Yes, very early here, and we are awaiting Air Force One. We understand President Trump still has not left the White House yet, but any minute he will take a motorcade over to Joint Base Andrews to make the transcontinental flight here at the same time that Putin is taking his presidential jet this way from Moscow. And today is going to be the best chance that a U.S. president has had in 3+ years to do what President Trump says is the #1 goal today, and that is stop the killing in Ukraine.
I think it's going to be very interesting. We're going to find out where everybody stands, and I'll know within the first 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or 5 minutes, like we tend to find out, whether or not we're going to have a good meeting or a bad meeting. And if it's a bad meeting, it'll end very quickly. And if it's a good meeting, we're going to end up getting peace in the pretty near future.
If this meeting goes sideways and the end of the war in Ukraine does not appear to be near, the president plans to punish Russia and Russia's trading partners with new economic sanctions. But if it goes well, President Trump is going to bring President Zelensky into the fold, and soon.
This meeting sets up, it's like a chess game. This meeting sets up the second meeting. But there is a 25% chance that this meeting will not be a successful meeting, in which case I will run the country, and we have made America great again already in 6 months. And at a minimum, I've calmed it way down.
President Trump is not saying one way or another whether or not he's going to wind up offering Russia access to rare earth minerals beneath the ground in Alaska. One of Alaska's Republican senators, Dan Sullivan, says that he hopes that does not ultimately happen. We know that President Trump has felt betrayed at times recently by Putin for saying one thing on the phone and doing something else on the battlefield. So it's also possible that things fall apart quickly here.
As Putin knows, I'm the toughest one that he's ever had to deal with. He's never had to deal with anybody like me. And here's the other thing, Brian. They got nothing out of Trump. They got no land. I think he respects our country now. He didn't respect it under Biden. Nobody respected us under Biden. But he respects our country now.
Right.
And we have the hottest country anywhere in the world.
President Trump has said as recently as last Friday that he is not politicking for the Nobel Peace Prize. But if he is able to end the war in Ukraine without Ukraine giving significant territory to Russia, then a former U.S. Secretary of State is saying that she would nominate him for the Nobel Prize. Believe it or not, that is former Secretary Hillary Clinton. Back to you.
Interesting.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
And it kind of, I thought he was going to say Condoleezza Rice, who sat down with Brett
Me
Baird
too.
yesterday.
Yeah. Congratulations on getting the interview with Donald Trump.
A lot of news.
Yeah, a lot of news broke. And something interesting, we talked about the press conference, and we thought there was going to be a joint press conference after Putin meets and maybe hear both sides there with the translator. But he told you in the interview that it could go differently.
Yeah, could go solo. He goes, maybe I'll do it by myself if it doesn't go well. Why? Because he tells you exactly what he wants to do, what he thinks, what he's going to do. And if it doesn't go well, he won't share the stage with him. But you were in Helsinki, and you know that he went there with Vladimir Putin. They did a dual press conference. Everyone was so flipped out by it. I remember Joe Biden wouldn't dare do it after his meeting. But what does he say in Helsinki? He said, I want great. People 4 hours later, they liked it at the time. 4 hours later, they had a problem with it. Why? He goes, because I said that I kind of believe Vladimir Putin over my intelligence. I have a respect for it. But guess what was happening? John Brennan, James Comey, Hillary Clinton, and to a degree, Barack Obama behind the scenes were working against him. The Russians picked up that they were going to be blamed for the 2016 election. So when the president said, you know what? I believe him. It turns out a lot of what Vladimir Putin, and I'm not saying this guy, he's the pariah of our generation. I got it. But in this case, he didn't do what they said he did, and it poisoned relations for 4 years. And my last analogy is this. Hitler is the worst figure maybe in world history, but he didn't bomb Pearl Harbor. So Putin is evil. He started this whole war. But if he didn't do what they said he did, that's what forced them together more.
So, Brian, I've been watching this play out. What I'm curious about, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is the Europeans. So they had their separate meeting, but the president was videoed in. I get the impression, after their meeting, they're just going to let the president do his thing to actually try to get the ceasefire. And they're not, it doesn't look like they're stepping on the president before, and even, Trump won. They would always step on the messaging. And even early on, when the tension was going on between Zelensky and the president, they would step in. It looks like they've learned to let Trump be Trump and not try to battle him publicly.
They asked for two things. They said, you cannot swap Ukrainian land. It's not your land. And the president goes, no kidding, I don't want to.
Yeah.
And he said, number two is, just go, we got to go for it. Ceasefire and security guarantees. And then whatever happens after that should be between Ukraine and Russia.
What the Ukrainians fear is the peace deal could be a capitulation to Russia. They say that Putin is really pushing to seize 30% of the Donetsk region. And it's rich in oil, it's rich in coal and iron and other minerals. And so Putin really wants that. But then Zelensky was asked about it, and he flat out rejected the idea of surrendering any land, Brian, to your point. The Ukrainians say that they feel exhaustion from the war and revulsion at the idea of rewarding Russia in any way for this unprovoked invasion, which was illegal. And they say even if the Russians are in territory in Ukraine, no one recognizes these territories as being under Russian control. They also worry if there is a peace deal, if it is signed, that Moscow could regroup and launch another full-scale attack. And they say nobody really believes it would be a real freeze.
Well, Ainsley, to that point of regrouping, that's why the land portion is so significant. Because, yes, the Ukrainians don't want to give up land, but they also don't want to give Putin a strategic advantage when they're at a stalemate right now of just going back and forth right now. They're in a position deadlock, right? This is like an old school war. If you let him regroup, then the war could go a different direction, right?
Right. So Jack Keane's coming up in 10 minutes, and he's going to talk about strategically there's certain areas which are a highway to Kyiv that they can't give up. But the area in the Donbass, they say Ukrainians are of two mindsets. Number one, they don't want to cede land, especially stolen from them. But number two, they are exhausted by this fight, and they've lost so many people in this battle. Less, by the way, less than the Russians. But the area in which they have is that they're holding right now is rare earth that includes iron and coal. That's kind of the backbone of their economy, and that's why the Russians are trying to take it.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, what do you think in the larger scales when it comes to the Ukrainians? When it comes to Biden said, and all the analysts said this would be over in how many days versus where we're at right now?
Biden, yeah.
I mean, you got to give the Ukrainians some credit on that front, right?
Pound for pound, they're the best fighting force in Europe right now. And guess who knows it? The Russians. And number two, part of the reason they were trained in Western style. And therefore, they don't respond like the Russians come at you like they're fighting Napoleon. And the Ukrainians made it clear that's not the way they were going to win.
We're waiting for the motorcade to roll up to Joint Base Andrews. You can see Air Force One there. The president's going to travel on a 7-hour flight up to Alaska to meet with Putin later today. They're going to have this one-on-one conversation with the help of interpreters, and then they're going to have a business lunch, and then the press conference. It might be a joint press conference. It might be a solo press conference, depending on how the meeting goes. And the president says he's hoping for a second meeting, and that would include Zelensky. And he's already said, I wonder if this is already on the books, because he said there are 3 locations on the table, including Alaska.
I'm really hopeful. First of all, Russia's economy is broken, and he's losing people. This was supposed to be over a long time ago, and his fighters haven't fought like they were supposed to fight, or at least how he thought they were going to fight. So they need something. They need some type of deal,
right,
or their economy is going to tank.
So here we know this for the first time. It's been released who's traveling with the president. It is Marco Rubio,
okay,
Commerce Secretary Lutnick, Commerce, got it. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. That is why there's an economic contingent also.
Well, he's responsible for the sanctions as well.
Right. And then John Radcliffe. So John Radcliffe is probably, and he's very tight with the president to brief him on what he's up against, former DIA too.
I wonder if they'll also talk about nuclear weapons, because in 2011, the New START treaty with the U.S. and Russia agreed to limit their arsenals of nuclear arms, but both countries had 7 years to meet the defined limits on the number of deployed intercontinental range nuclear missiles or weapons that they're allowed to have. But the treaty expires in February.
I like this deck that Ainsley, that the president is taking with him for a couple of reasons. Of course, you guys got Bessent, who is going to be doing the sanctions, but you got Marco Rubio, who has become a master diplomat, but understands the president as well. But why Johnny Ratcliffe is important, as Brian noted, he used to be over all the intelligence agencies. But with CIA, the president talks about every single day the briefing that he gets of all the bodies that are there between Russia as well as Ukraine. To have him there to tell Putin, we know exactly where you're at. We know exactly where you're locked in at. You need to end this war too and get it from the horse's mouth. I think that's brilliant of the president.
Yeah, so do the profile and understand. I'm sure John Ratcliffe goes, look, he's going to try to flatter you. He's going to come in and say, you're the man. I think you should get a Nobel Peace Prize. All right, so what are you looking to do? Well, let's just talk to the economy. The president goes, no, I'm not going to. He's going to say, I'm not going to talk about economic things until we agree to some type of ceasefire. So, but not a land swap. So I think that'll be interesting. Also, I think there's going to be a visual. There's going to be a visual of the president walking in between America's hardware on that military base to Vladimir Putin. Mm-hmm. He's 6 inches bigger than Putin, and he's going to be walking through fighter jets. And the message should be clear. You know, we're here.
But he's also, with that news that he broke with you on your radio show, it's very smart of the president to say, okay, I'll give you the meeting, we'll talk. But if there's nothing reached, then I'm not going to give you the world stage and have you come side by side with me in front of the cameras. Yeah, I'm going to take back the world stage and just do it by myself.
And the European leaders who talked to Donald Trump 2 days ago on Wednesday, they said that Trump did sympathize with their message and their calls for an immediate ceasefire, and that Ukraine must have a seat at the table in future negotiations. You know, Trump did send nuclear submarines over around the territory around Russia. 2 nuclear submarines. They're strategically placed and positioned near Russia. And that was in response to Medvedev's provocative comments.
Threats.
Yes, exactly.
The former president. And he was mentored by Vladimir Putin. 12 minutes after the hour now. Don't miss our special coverage of this historic Trump-Putin summit, starting at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Brett Baer is live at 6. He could have an interview with Vladimir Putin. He will have an interview with President Trump. I'll also be hosting special coverage between 7 and 9. And then Sean Hannity will be live from Alaska at 9, where at some point, live or on tape, he'll have an interview with the president, we believe.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.